Welcome back to another edition of Flying MMA Opinions and News. I am Flying Brian, and this podcast episode is proudly brought to you by Unique Kennels, the official bulldog of MMA, raising affordable and healthy bulldogs for the last 30 years. Look him up on Twitter at UniqueKennels71 and also on Instagram, instagram.com/UniqueKennels. If you haven't had your daily dose of cute yet, go there to get that in right now. With me again today is Daniel Levy with MMA Thought and Best Fight Picks. Find him on Twitter at MMA Thought and also at Best Fight Picks. If you don't know this guy yet, you're in for one hell of a treat because this guy is the best fight analyst in the entire mixed martial arts community and will soon be a household name. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me here again today. How are you, my friend?
Brian, doing great, man, and thank you so much for having me back, dude.
Having you on my show last week was the highlight of my week, and right now, talking to you right now is the highlight of this week. We are going to talk about UFC Fight Night 66 this week, but before we get to that, will you tell us how last week turned out for you?
It went really well, man. You know, we went 4 for 4 on underdogs, and we won 5.35 units, and we're extending our win streak to 17 straight bets, so it's going pretty good for Best Fight Picks right now.
Holy shit, 17 in a row?
That's called a winning streak. It has happened before.
But I'm certain that you can recreate that magic again for UFC Fight Night 66, which takes place live and free this Saturday from Manila, Philippines. It truly is breakfast with the UFC because this first fight takes place on Fight Pass at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 4 a.m. Pacific Time.
I'm pumped, man. You know, Edgar and Faber, not only are they two legends in the sport, but this is literally one of the biggest fights in featherweight history.
They're billing it as a super fight, and I'm certain that that is the truth, and we will get to that soon enough. But the first fight of this card is between two men coming off losses in the bantamweight division and will compete against each other in the flyweight division. The minus 230 favorite Nolan Tickman brings a professional record of 4 wins with 2 losses and a 5-inch reach advantage to the octagon for his matchup against the plus 190 underdog Zhao the Conqueror Jikoi, who has a professional record of 1 win with 3 defeats. How do you see this fight panning out?
Well, both guys are relatively inexperienced. Yao's one of these guys that was on the Ultimate Fighter China series, and he's more of a grappling-based fighter. And even though his record is under 500, his last fight against Royston Wee, many people thought that he won. So his record could be a little bit better. But what this guy tries to do is just get that top position and ride out the fight. Now, Nolan Tickman, he actually trains out of King's MMA with Master Rafael Cordero, and he's got training partners like the champ, Rafael Dos Anjos, and Benny Dariush, even interim champ Fabricio Werdum. And Nolan Tickman's a very scrappy stand-up kind of fighter. He actually went the distance with Frankie Saenz, the guy who just beat Yuri Alcantara. So in this specific fight, I'm going to have to go with Nolan Tickman by either TKO or a dominant decision.
And how about for units? Are you putting any units on this fight?
I am passing on this fight.
So Tickman, TKO, but no units. Moving on to the second fight of the night, we will stay at 125 pounds for a matchup between a minus 185 favorite, John the Heat De Los Reyes, who has a professional record of 7 wins with 4 defeats and will bring a slight 2-inch reach advantage over the plus 160 underdog, Roldan the Executioner Sang Chung On, who has a professional record of 4 wins with just 1 defeat.
You know, John De Los Reyes, his name's the Heat, and it's very fitting. He comes to fight, man. This guy's a brawler. He's very, very tough. And he's actually fought some really decent guys despite the losses. You know, he went in there against Kyoji Horiguchi, and even though he lost by a first-round TKO, he went out on his shield. He came to fight. And in his fight with Dustin Kimura, he was actually lighting him up on the feet. The way it ended, though, was as soon as the fight hit the ground, he got submitted. But on the feet, man, he almost had Kimura out. So John De Los Reyes, he's a very, very tough guy. His only weakness is the submission defense. Now, for Roldan Sengcha'an, his problem is that he lacks experience. Now, in his last fight against Richie Vasulik, he was actually wearing Muay Thai shorts, so I expected him to come out and stand and bang, but he actually initiated the grappling with Vasulik, and then he got out-grappled the entire fight. So in my opinion, he kind of lacks a little bit of fight IQ, and seasoning. So for that reason, I'm picking De Los Reyes by a TKO or a submission, and I'm not betting on this fight.
Do you think that the Muay Thai shorts could have been like a mental game plan?
You never know, man. It could very well be, but he definitely initiated the grappling and he paid for it.
All right, no bet once again. The next fight will take place in the bantamweight division and is the first fight of the preliminary portion of this card and is broadcast on Fox Sports 1 for free, beginning at 8 a.m. Eastern and 5 a.m. Pacific time. Undefeated in 4 professional fights, Royston Wee will have a 3-inch reach advantage over the southpaw Ning Smasher Gyungyo, who brings a professional record of 5 wins with 2 losses and 1 draw in what is basically a pick'em. How do you see this fight panning out?
You know, Royston Wee, he actually didn't even make it onto the season of the Tough China show, but he's actually 2-0 in the UFC. Now, he's a grappling-based fighter. He just really wants that top position. He wants to grind you out, but he's very, very green. His stand-up isn't the best by any stretch of the imagination, but he's found a way to win so far in the UFC. But like we mentioned earlier, his last win against Zhao was a tad bit controversial, but nonetheless, he's 2-0 in the UFC. Now, Ning, he's also a bit inexperienced, but he's fought somewhat better guys, and he's more aggressive than Wee, and he likes to finish the fight if he can. So I'm going to pick Ning to win, but the fight could go either way, and once again, no bet.
So we're going to wait for a while to get into some bets, and you said last week that we are going to unveil Best Fight Pick's biggest bet ever on the main card portion. Is that correct?
It's definitely the biggest bet of this year in terms of the amount risked.
We will get there eventually, but next up we have a welterweight matchup between Lee the Leech Jingliang and Diego Lima. Diego Lima is 11-3 in his professional career and will be a 190 favorite. Lima has a 4-inch reach advantage, and both men are coming off defeats, and both of their last victories were by decision. Do you see this going any differently?
Yeah, Diego Lima, he's actually got a really well-rounded skill set. You know, everyone knows he's the brother of Douglas Lima, the Bellator champion. And Diego, he trains under Zhao at ATT Atlanta with training partners such as his brother Douglas, Rafael Asuncao, and all the other great fighters that fight out of that gym. Now, he's very good all around. The only thing holding him back is his ability to take a big punch. You know, he looked really good against Tim Means, and then he got caught, and he just couldn't recover. In my personal opinion, he could drop down to 155 pounds. Now, Li Jingliang, he's a very tough scrapper. He's very durable, and he might not have the skills that Diego has, but he does have a puncher's chance in this fight. And, you know, in his last fight against Nordin Taleb, it was a split decision loss, but many people thought Jingliang could have taken that decision. So I'm going to pick Diego by decision, but I don't fault anyone for taking a shot on the dog here because there is a potential he can crack Diego's chin.
And again, if you're playing UFC Pick'em, when the line is this tight, I usually pick decision like you just picked Diego Lima by decision.
Yeah, you know, Diego, he's a really well-rounded fighter, like I mentioned. It's just his ability to take a punch. That's why I'm not betting on him, but he is the better guy here.
Once again, we have a fight between two men who are coming off losses. This time in the lightweight division, we have Ragin Cajun Johnson, who will bring a 4-inch reach advantage and a professional record of 19 wins, 12 losses, and 1 draw to the octagon to square off against 9, 8, and 1, plus 125 southpaw underdog, Jang the Warrior. Li Pang, which man gets the win this time?
So Cajun Johnson, he fights out at TriStar with Firas Zahabi, who's a very, very good coach. And he has 11 wins by submission and 4 wins by KO. But despite that number, he actually likes to keep the fight on his feet. He throws really big head kicks, and he's well-rounded overall. His only issue is actually similar to Diego Lima, is that he can't really take that big of a shot. And in my opinion, he's got a way, way worse chin. You know, on the show, Chad Laprie broke his jaw, and then he was having a good fight with Taehyung Bang, but he threw a head kick and then got countered with a straight right and went out, man. Now, Lipang Zhang, he actually won the season of Tough China. Now, as we know, the level of competition and the talent level on that Tough China show. It wasn't the best in the world, but Zhang managed to win the entire show. Now, he's one of these guys that likes the top position. He likes to grapple, and he actually went 2-0 in his first 2 UFC fights, but then he lost a decision to Chris Wade. In my opinion, he is most likely outmatched here, so I'm going to have to go with Cajun by being a superior fighter. But this is MMA, and one punch could change the fight. But I'm going to go with Cajun Johnson.
And really, we've seen recently that Chad Lepre is nothing to be fucked with, and so a loss to him really isn't that big a deal.
Yeah, I agree, man.
Once again, no bet?
Yeah, definitely not worth a bet because I am favoring Cajun Johnson, but his inability to take a punch, I can't lay any money on him. So, I'd pick him for fantasy, but I'm absolutely staying away from a bet.
The last fight of the prelims takes place in the lightweight division between Supernatural Taehyung Bang and John the Super Saiyan Tuck. Bang is plus 135 underdog with a professional record of 17 wins and 8 losses. Tuck is a minus 155 favorite that will have a 2-inch reach advantage and has a professional record of 8-2. Which man will go from super to ordinary?
Taehyung Bang, if you couldn't tell by his name, he likes to stand and bang, and he's a very, very tough guy. He went the distance with Mairbek Taisumov, and if you've been seeing Taisumov's last couple fights, he's been putting dudes away. Now, even though Bang lost the fight, he showed his toughness in there. He got outclassed, but he went 3 hard rounds with him. And then in his next fight, he knocked out Cajun Johnson like we mentioned before. He ate a head kick, and then he threw a straight right and knocked him out. Now, John Tuck, he fights out of the lab, with John Crouch, Benson Henderson. And in 2010, this guy actually won the gold medal at the Abu Dhabi grappling tournament, which is one of the biggest grappling competitions in the world, as everyone knows. And I believe he was a brown belt at the time, but currently he's a black belt. Now, John Tuck, he's a very, very scrappy guy. He went 3 hard rounds with Norman Park, and some people thought that could have gone either way. I personally scored it for Park. And it's funny, he actually beat Jake Lindsay via heel strikes to the body. Like, he took this guy's back, and then he started heel striking him in the body, and Jake Lindsay tapped out. Now, with this specific fight, I'm going to have to go with John Tuck by decision, just via being more experienced and more well-rounded than Bang. But Bang can end any fight with 1 punch, but I can't bank on that, and I got to go with John Tuck by decision, no bet.
Wouldn't it just be wild if Tuck got another TKO from heel strikes to the body? That'd probably be a UFC record for most times that has happened.
It absolutely would be. He already has the record for most times it's happened.
With 1?
Yep.
I'd love to see the Fightnomics on this, but the first fight of the main card portion is scheduled to take place at 10 a.m. Eastern Time and 7 a.m. Pacific Time on Fox Sports 1. I do not understand the distinction between prelims and main card when it's all on the same channel. We don't have to switch, but whatever. This fight takes place in the featherweight division. We have 9-1. Levan, the Hornet, Makishvili comes in as an enormous minus 400 favorite on just 10 days' notice to fight Mark Adiva, who is a plus 310 underdog with a professional record of 6 wins and 1 loss. I can hardly believe that a man filling in on just 10 days' notice is that large of a favorite, but certainly there is something to that. Can you fill me in, Daniel?
I completely agree, Brian. The line is definitely a bit off. Now, Makishvili, he's a very tough European prospect. If I'm not mistaken, he's actually a European wrestling champion. So he can take you down, but if you watch his fights, he hits really hard too, man. He went 5 tough rounds with Popo Bazea, who's actually a Bellator vet. This guy's very, very good. And he went 5 rounds with Makishvili. And initially, Makishvili was supposed to fight Nick Lentz, and interestingly enough, many people were picking Levan to upset Nick Lentz. So that tells you how people regard this guy. He's very, very good. But I heard he took this fight on 5 days short notice. Now that's very, very short notice to be considered a minus 400 favorite. So he should win, but an upset wouldn't be surprising. Now, in terms of his opponent, Mark Adiva, who's sitting at plus 310, he's actually the hometown guy. And this dude likes to scrap, man. He'll stand and bang. And he went toe-to-toe with Kevin Souza and actually gave him a really good fight. And if you've been seeing Kevin Souza's fights in the UFC, I mean, he's been pretty damn dominant, and Mark Adiva gave him a fight. I mean, he went out on his shield, but he stood and banged till the bitter end. Now, there's a potential upset here, but it's not something I'm willing to take a stab on at all. I'm going to probably pick Makishvili by decision on fantasy, but if you're going to bet on this fight, I really do think it's dog or pass, but I don't recommend the bet.
Yeah, I'd definitely pass on that bet. I just cannot fathom how a dude on, like you said, 5 days notice is minus 400. When I was looking at the odds the first time, I thought, no, that's fucking opposite, right? How often has a guy come in on 5 days notice and been that large of a favorite? I'm betting less than 5 times.
It's crazy, man. The line's definitely off, but it shows you the kind of regard that people hold Makishvili in. So we'll see if he can live up to that in his UFC debut.
And that's another thing. UFC debut on 5 days notice, minus 400. Well, okay. Staying in the featherweight division, we have a must-win situation for a plus 155 underdog Felipe, the Filipino assassin Nover, as he take on the minus 175 favorite, the Korean bulldozer Chol Nam, who brings a 5-fight winning streak along with a professional record of 18 wins with 4 defeats and 1 draw. Do you think that Nover will get a much-needed win and avoid that dreaded UFC pink slip?
You know, at one point, many people were singing high praises for Felipe Nover. I don't know if you recall, but when he was on that season of Tough, people were like comparing him to Anderson Silva and GSP. Now, as we saw, it was a little far-fetched, but the guy's talented, and ever since his release from the UFC, he's been piling together wins. His only losses were actually against very, very tough guys. He went to a controversial split decision with Marcin Held, and if you've seen Marcin Held fight, he's like the Toquinho of the 145-pound decision. You know, Husimar Palhares, this guy destroys dudes' legs. So Felipe Nover took him all 3 rounds, and it was a split decision. So that shows you the kind of improvements that Nover's been making. And in addition to that, he's actually training with Frankie Edgar. So you know he's getting better every single fight, every single day in practice he's getting better. I mean, the coaches at that gym are so good. Ricardo Almeida, Mark Henry, and, you know, his opponent, Chol Nam. In this guy's debut, he literally knocked down his opponent 4 times in the first round. Now, when you knock someone down 4 times in the first round and they don't go out, you're going to get tired because you're giving it everything you got and the guy just won't go out. And so in the second round, he kind of got grinded a little bit because he was so gassed out from trying to finish the guy in the first round. But then in the third round, he picked it back up, and he was able to take home the split decision. In my opinion, it should have been unanimous, but he got the victory. That's all that matters. And if Nam can come out here and land his vicious strikes, he could foreseeably get a knockout victory here. The only issue is that, you know, Nover, like I said, he's been training with Frankie Edgar, so you know he's putting in that work on the wrestling mat. And if there's one weakness we saw in Nam's game, it's the wrestling. So if Felipe Nover can expose him in the wrestling department, he could for sure get the upset here. I'm going to lean a little bit towards Nam, but I'm not going to bet on this fight, and I don't blame anyone for taking a stab on the dog.
As we get into the most fun portion of this fight card, we move into the welterweight division. Magny comes in as a very slight favorite at minus 125. Despite having an 80-inch reach, he'll only have a 3-inch reach advantage over the plus 105 underdog, Hyun, the ace, Lim. Magny is on an impressive 5-fight winning streak. Will he keep it going?
This is a really, really good fight. You know, normally Magny has such a big reach advantage over all his opponents that he's really able to utilize it. You know, that 80-inch reach, it's the largest reach in UFC welterweight history. And interestingly enough, Hyun Lim has a 77-inch reach, which is the second largest reach in welterweight history. So both these guys are used to having reach advantages over their opponents. And, you know, Magny still does have a 3-inch reach advantage, but he's used to having, you know, stuff like a 7-inch reach advantage. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can use the 3 inches reach here. But as far as how they match up, you know, Hyun Lim, this guy hits extremely hard. And he's tough, man. He's like a zombie. In that fight with Tarek Saffiedine, he was eating leg kicks from a high-level kickboxer for all 5 rounds. And then in the 5th round, he almost knocked out Tarek Saffiedine. So literally this guy has heart for days. Now, this is a 3-round fight. And the thing with Magny is he doesn't necessarily come out and try to knock you out. He's more of like a finesse guy. He'll try to outpoint you a bit. Like, do you remember that little period when Rory McDonald was kind of jabbing dudes a lot and winning decisions, like that fight with Jake Ellenberger, before he started getting back to like his viciousness, and he was kind of just winning like decisions. That's kind of like what Neil Magny does. He uses his jab very effectively. He has a very good front kick, and he's developing his ground game really well too. You know, he trains out of Grudge in Colorado, so he's training at altitude. His cardio is going to be on point. And he's got some great training partners, you know, Brandon Thatch. I know Matt Brown went up there for a little bit and helped him out. So Neil Magny is going to come in prepared. Now, the issue when you're fighting a guy like Lim is that he can knock you out with one strike, whether it's a flying knee or a straight right. This guy packs some serious power. I don't think that Lim is as technical as Magny. So what could happen is, you know, potentially Magny could get dropped in the first round, and then after that we're going to have to see how he recovers from it. Or he could run circles around Lim and pick him apart the entire fight. Now, one thing I want to point out is that odds makers actually opened Lim as the favorite, but the public switched it around, and now Magny's the favorite. And in this particular case, I actually agree with the public. You know, last week, Sean O'Connell opened as the favorite, and then the public moved Perosh as the favorite, and then I bet on O'Connell as the underdog. Now, in this specific instance, I'm doing the opposite, and I agree with the public this time. I do think Neil Magny should be the favorite. You just got to watch out for the knockout power of Hyun-Yu Lim. So I'm going to take Neil Magny by decision on fantasy, and I almost bet on it, but I'm passing on a bet here.
As you mentioned about the reach advantage, both guys normally enjoys a little bit of reach advantage, and I remember one very high-profile fight a couple years back probably, between Johnny Bones Jones and Alexander the Mauler Gustafsson. Both of those guys were used to being the lengthier fighter, and then they fought each other, and that was not the case. Both guys had a sweet reach. If this fight between Neil Magny and Hyun-Yu Lim is half as exciting as that fight was, this will definitely be the fight of the night. Do you agree?
Yeah, it definitely has that potential. You know, it's going to be interesting because you got the precision striker, Neil Magny, and then you got the aggressive powerhouse in Hyun-Yu Lim. So it's going to be a matter of, can Magny pick him apart and use his well-rounded game, or is Hyun-Yu Lim going to outpower him and knock him out?
I'm fucking really excited for that fight now.
It's going to be good, dude. I can't wait.
Now, this next fight, you and I have been looking forward to putting units on this middleweight matchup since they announced it. 13-6, Mark the Filipino wrecking machine Munoz has already stated that a win or a loss in this fight, it will be his last. The man who gets the honor of sending Munoz into retirement is the Ultimate Fighter Season 15 competitor Luke Big Slow Barnett, who has a professional record of 8 wins and 2 losses, plus he will have a 5-inch reach advantage. Munoz is a slight underdog at plus 145 to minus 164 Barnett. It would be nice to see Munoz to go out on a high note, I think. But do you think that'll happen?
Probably not, man. And let's just talk about Mark Munoz for a second. You know, he's had a great career. In my opinion, his best performances were against Chris Lieben and Tim Boesch. He looked absolutely dominant in those fights. But the problem with Mark Munoz is that, you know, he is a great wrestler, but his wrestling has never really translated to MMA very well. Like, he doesn't transition his strikes to his takedowns too effectively, especially in his last couple fights. You know, against Tim Boesch, he was able to absolutely dominate him with the wrestling, but that's because Tim Boesch initiated the wrestling. And I know for a fact that Luke Barnett is not going to initiate grappling with Mark Munoz. Now, here's the thing. You got to watch the weigh-ins for this fight, because Munoz is one of these guys that sometimes he'll come in absolutely shredded and ripped, and then sometimes he'll come in looking kind of fat. And usually when he comes in looking fat, he gets absolutely destroyed. Now, if he comes in here looking ripped out of his mind at the weigh-ins, there's a potential that Munoz can actually go out on a win here. I just personally don't see that happening. You know, he already announced his retirement. That means he has one foot out the door. And anytime a fighter has one foot out the door, when it comes to betting, you always got to look towards his opponent. And his opponent happens to be a guy that's 6'6", with close to a 7 or 8 inch reach advantage. And Luke Barnett's going to look to keep this fight on the outside, and, potentially land a vicious straight right or a big knee when Munoz comes in for the takedown. And the thing that's been going on with Munoz lately, like I mentioned, like I alluded to, is that he hasn't been setting up his takedowns. He'll kind of just rush in there, or he'll throw a very sloppy overhand right. And that's not going to bode well when you're fighting a guy with the range of Barnett. So most likely Barnett knocks him out, maybe even chokes him out. But if Munoz comes in super shredded and ripped at the weigh-ins, we could potentially see Munoz lay on this guy for 3 rounds and do his patented Donkey Kong punches, his ground and pound, which has been vicious in the past. But Munoz has looked like an absolute shell of himself in his past couple of fights, and he doesn't want to fight anymore. As you know, he's retiring. And Luke, even though he'll probably never be a UFC champion, he at least has those title aspirations. So you just got to take that for what it's worth. Now, if everything looks good at the weigh-ins, I'm going to probably lay up to 2 units on Luke Barnett. You just have to follow me on Twitter, and I'll let you know if I end up going through with that play. So it's either going to be Barnett or pass, but I'm just going to have to check out the weigh-ins and see if Munoz is fat or if he's absolutely shredded.
We will say this a few more times throughout this podcast, but you can follow Daniel at MMA Thought on Twitter and also at Best Fight Picks. Daniel, I honestly do not see Mark Munoz coming in as shredded, like you said, because, like you said also, he announced that he's retiring after this fight no matter what, and then also he sold his gym lately, so I feel like he's had a lot of distractions. He's got a foot out the door. I don't see him getting up for this fight very well, maybe because, he is the Filipino wrecking machine, and this is in the Philippines. Maybe for that reason he will come in super shredded, but I do not see that happening, and if you do that 2-unit thing, I will follow you.
I absolutely agree, Brian. I also don't think that he's going to come in looking shredded. In my opinion, to him, the victory is just fighting in the Philippines. I don't really think winning or losing is what matters here. I think just the fact that he gets to fight in front of his hometown crowd, his people in the Philippines, that's a victory in itself to him. And, that's a very dangerous proposition when you talk about getting into a mixed martial arts fight inside the octagon. So for that reason, I'm going with Luke Barnett for via stoppage.
Also, if anyone out there is playing the counter move, I would put Barnett on your counter move team. I don't care what the cost, put him on there. In the co-main event of the evening, Gegard, the Dreamcatcher Mousasi, who will bring a lengthy record of 36 wins, 5 defeats, and 2 draws to the octagon on Saturday as the largest favorite on the card at minus 600 over the 13-4 Costas Philippou, who is the odds underdog at plus 450. I have a feeling that you don't believe Mousasi deserves to be that large of a favorite, but I am excited to hear your analysis nonetheless.
You are correct, Brian. Now, what can you say about Gegard Mousasi? The guy has had so many fights. He's fought the who's who. He's beat big names in the sport. Let's see. He finished Mark Hunt. He finished Jacare. He finished Dan Henderson. He beat OSP. The guy's beat the who's who. And he's very well-rounded. He can take you down and submit you, or he can stand and bang and knock you out. He's got a very, very well-rounded skill set. The only issue with Mousasi in the past is that the guy's had so many fights that, from time to time, he doesn't really get up for fights. Now, he admitted that he didn't get up for the Jacare fight. Now, my only thing with that is, if you can't get up for the number one guy in Jacare, how are you going to get up for Costa Philippou, who, I'm not sure if he's even in the top 10. So the motivation for Mousasi, that's my only question. And it's my question because, he's a minus 650 favorite. That's a really, really big favorite for a guy that sometimes doesn't show up. But when he does show up, he's one of the absolute best in the world. Now, his opponent, Costa Philippou, the guy's he's got some really good boxing. And he used to train with Ray Longo, Chris Weidman, Matt Serra, all those guys. But he left that camp because I think he thought he'd eventually get matched up with Weidman. And it's actually proved to kind of be a detriment. He's lost a couple fights. He got basically laid on for 3 rounds by Francis Carmon. And then Luke Rockhold finished him via body kick in the first round. Now, if Mousasi is able to get him down like Carmon did, I really think that Mousasi can finish the job via submission. And on the feet, Costa Philippou definitely has a puncher's chance. He knocked out Lorenz Larkin, and that's quite a feat. Obviously King Mo knocked out Lorenz Larkin, but the way King Mo knocked him out was inside Larkin's guard. Philippou knocked him out at his own game, standing up on the feet. So, that means something right there. But this isn't Lorenz Larkin. This is Gegard Mousasi, one of the most experienced guys in the UFC. So I'm going to pick Mousasi inside the distance. A decision wouldn't surprise me one bit. But due to the fact that the line is minus 650, I'm completely passing. And I know people are going to be putting him in their parlays, but I just can't do it, man. The line's a little bit too off for me.
As you talk about with a lot of fights, you say that we need to watch the weigh-ins to gauge how their body looks and their body language and stuff. With Gegard Mousasi, a guy that never changes his facial expression, do you think that we could get anything from that?
Now, the guy always looks like he woke up from a nap, so it's going to be really tough to gauge what his mental state is. But I'm just passing on a bet, and I'm going to really enjoy the fight, man. I think that it's going to be action-packed, and Mousasi can definitely get the finish here. Costa has proven to be quite durable. He's only been finished once in his career, but Mousasi is a finisher, man. He actually has 19 wins by knockout and 12 wins by submission and only 5 by decision. That right there is a finisher.
Yeah, wow, that is pretty damn impressive. When I opened up this fight, I said that Mousasi was minus 600, and you said he was minus 650. Well, he ranges on all of the betting websites or wherever you want to bet between minus 550 as the low and minus 650 as the high. Sportsbook has him at minus 550, and Bovada has him at minus 650. That's quite the range. I, too, will be putting Gegard Mousasi with a finish on my UFC pick'em. I haven't looked at the counter move yet, but I'm assuming that he's going to be really pricey as that large of a favorite. So I don't know if you can fit him on your counter move team, do that. But if not, I don't think you're going to be missing out on too much there. Finally, we are at the main event of the evening. We mentioned it in the opening that this is a super fight, and it is that because it pits former WEC featherweight champion Uriah, the California kid, Faber, versus the former UFC lightweight champion, Frankie the Answer Edgar. This fight will take place in the featherweight division. Faber has an incredible 32 wins, with all 7 of his defeats coming in main event or title fight. Faber is plus 360, Edgar is minus 450, and I just don't see Faber adding a loss to Frankie Edgar's impressive 17-4 record. How do you see this highly anticipated main event playing out?
Man, this really is a super fight. This literally is one of the biggest fights in featherweight history. Let's start with Uriah Faber. The guy's an absolute legend. If it wasn't for Uriah Faber and BJ Penn too, the lighter weight classes wouldn't really have a platform. This guy is almost like the George Washington of the lighter weight classes. He really opened the door for them to have a platform, in the WEC. And the reason people respect Uriah Faber so much, in addition to his exciting style, is because he has so much heart. So he got knocked out by Mike Brown, and then in the second fight, he comes in there, he breaks both of his hands in the first round, and then he ends up going 5 hard rounds with Mike Brown in his fight of the year at that time. So Faber is one of these guys that you can't help but admire him, and he finishes fights, man. He finishes very, very tough guys, like choked out Michael McDonald and beat Brian Bowles back when Brian Bowles was really good, and he finished Rafael Asuncao. You don't just choke out a black belt like Asuncao. So Faber is a great fighter, man. The places that he struggles, though, is against the elite of the elite. Back when Faber was champion, it was a completely different era of the sport. But somehow he's managed to keep on evolving, and he's always going to be a perennial top 5 guy. He's just not quite a top 2 guy. Now, with Frankie Edgar, this guy's also an absolute legend. So in his UFC debut against Tyson Griffin, when I saw that fight, I knew for a fact that Frankie Edgar was going to be champion. In the third round, Tyson Griffin put Frankie in a deep, deep knee bar and started cranking that knee bar. And Frankie refused to tap. I mean, he was literally punching Tyson Griffin while his knee was getting cranked. He was ready to let that knee break, and then he ended up winning the decision. So right then and there in his UFC debut, you saw the kind of championship heart that Frankie Edgar possesses. And, he subsequently went on to be the guy that dethroned BJ Penn. And everyone knows at the time, BJ Penn was the scariest lightweight in the world, man. And what's also so cool about Frankie Edgar is that when he was the 155-pound champ, he was literally walking around at 155 pounds. And, as you may know, a lot of these guys cut down from like 175. So he'd be fighting dudes that have a 20-pound weight advantage over him, and he'd do quite well over them. So when he beat BJ Penn and then subsequently dominated him in the rematch, it really sent a message. Now, when he lost the title to Benson Henderson, a lot of people thought that fight could have gone either way. And, Frankie actually dropped Benson a couple times within the series of their two fights. So many people were left with a bitter taste in their mouth when he lost to Benson because they thought that he actually won the fight. But you know what? Frankie could have hung up the gloves back then and been like, look, I won the 155-pound belt. I defended it 3 times. I lost it. What a great career. But instead of calling it a career, he ends up going down to 145 pounds and puts on a fight of the night with the champion Jose Aldo. And some people can argue that he won rounds 3 through 5. So he was the most competitive fight that Aldo's ever had. Now, I know someone's going to be like, what about the Chad Mendes fight? Well, if you recall, all the scorecards on the Chad Mendes fight were 49-46. Edgar got a couple 48-47s. That means it was a closer fight. Now, ever since the Aldo fight, he's been doing some work at the 145-pound division. He dominated Charles do Bronx Oliveira, and not only did he beat him, he went into Oliveira's guard. And if you know about Charles Oliveira, you know that this guy's got one of the most dangerous Brazilian jiu-jitsu games in the entire sport. And Frankie had zero problems going inside this guy's guard and beating him up. And, obviously he retired BJ Penn. But after that, what he did to Cub Swanson, dude, Cub Swanson was on a 6-fight win streak and was about to get a title shot, was at the peak of his career, looking better than ever. And Frankie literally took this guy's soul away. Cub Swanson was never the same after that. I mean, you saw his fight with Max Holloway. Credit to Max Holloway. He looked absolutely incredible. But you can tell Cub didn't have that same fire. And that's because Frankie took it away from him. So, like I mentioned earlier, what's so badass about Frankie is that he's always been the little guy fighting bigger guys. Benson Henderson fought at 170 against Brandon Thatch. BJ Penn's the former 170-pound champion. And, Frankie Edgar, even though he lost to Benson Henderson, a lot of people thought he won, and then he obviously put it on BJ Penn. So this guy, he's a total badass. And this is going to be the first time when Frankie Edgar is actually the bigger guy. So this is going to be really, really cool to see. It's going to actually be kind of fun for him. And I know people are going to be like, well, Faber might be faster. And I completely disagree. I actually think that Faber's kind of slowed down a bit in his last couple fights, whereas Frankie, he keeps getting better every single fight. Frankie's also going to have around a 5-inch reach advantage. For a short guy that's 5'6", he actually has a 72-inch reach. And that's going to really come into play here. In addition to his footwork and his boxing and his takedowns, he's really going to mix it up. And I truly believe that Frankie Edgar is going to finish Uriah Faber. So I have my eye on the Frankie Edgar inside the distance prop at plus 268. But what we're doing with this fight is we're going to put 8 units straight up on Frankie Edgar. Now, I got it at minus 380. Right now it's minus 450. I wouldn't go past minus 450. But I still recommend putting 8 units on him. Now, normally it's against my policy to lay the chalk, as they like to say. But I truly believe that this is an investment that's going to pay off, man. And for that reason, it's my only play of this card, unless I decide to play Luke Barnett. But with that being said, 8 units on Frankie Edgar, investment.
I love all of that. But there's one thing that I can't get over. I disagree on Frankie Edgar's reach. I'm looking at Fight Metric, and he is a 68-inch reach to Uriah Faber's 67.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because I've seen his reach listed at so many different numbers. In the BJ Penn fight, it was listed at 72, and then in I think one of the Gray Maynard fights, it was listed at 68. So they keep mixing it around, but I know for a fact he has a longer reach than it's listed at.
I'm going to go with you and say that he has a 72-inch reach because when I was doing my research for this fight, I was thinking that Edgar was for certain going to have the reach advantage, and I could not believe when Fight Metrics said that he only had a 1-inch reach advantage. And I'm also a little bit flabbergasted that they're the same height. Uriah Faber kind of seems short, and short with his reach and short with his height too in the bantamweight division, so I assumed that Frankie Edgar, being a 145 or 155er, would be a lot bigger than Uriah Faber, but they're actually like the same size.
Well, that's another thing I wanted to point out. Fight Metric does have them listed at the same height, but I don't believe they're the same height, man. I think Frankie Edgar's 5'6", and I think Uriah is like 5'4". I know he's always been listed at 5'6", but when you see them stand face to face, Frankie's the taller guy, and Frankie's always been shorter than everyone. So for that reason, I definitely think that Frankie's taller. Now, I don't base fights on who's the taller guy or this or that. I think Frankie's more skilled, and at this point in his career, he still has title aspirations. I heard both of their pre-fight interviews, and Uriah, he's talking about how he helps his teammates and, about his gym and this and that. And Frankie's whole thing was, I deserve that title. I want that title. I'm going to get that title. That's all that's on Frankie's mind. Whereas if Uriah talks about getting the title, I mean, you just recall all the opportunities he's already had. Renan Barão stopped him. Renan Barão clearly beat him over 5 rounds. Dominic Cruz beat him. Jose Aldo beat him decisively. So Frankie's way closer to the title than Uriah. Now, if Uriah is able to get this upset, that'll make a statement. But I just don't see it happening, man. I really think that Frankie Edgar is the much better fighter at this point in their respective careers, and I do think that he can finish Uriah Faber.
Frankie Edgar runs to the octagon. Once he gets there, I agree that he is going to run through Uriah Faber. I will follow you with putting these 8 units on Frankie the Answer Edgar. After this fight, let's speculate and look forward. Do you think that he gets another title shot against Jose Aldo soon?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a chance that Jose Aldo might not be the champion because he's fighting Conor McGregor. So we have to see how that fight goes down. And I just want to say I can't wait to break that one down with you. But, and then we also got guys like Max Holloway. Hopefully he gets to fight Chad Mendes for a number 1 contender spot. So it all depends. We got to see how it all plays out. But, the top guys in line for the shot are definitely Edgar, Holloway, and Mendes. So we're going to have to see what happens with Aldo versus McGregor, July 11th, UFC 189.
Fuck, man. The featherweight division, 145 pounds, is absolutely a great fucking time right now. I can't wait for those fights in the future. If they make that Max Holloway versus Chad Mendes fight, that'll be fucking phenomenal. And then, of course, the Jose Aldo versus Conor, the Notorious McGregor, they have been hyping that fight for months now. I can't wait for that to get here. And starting things off with the excitement in this division is this super fight. I cannot wait for what the future has to bring us.
It's going to be crazy, man. It's this weekend. It's going to be a showcase for the featherweight division. Obviously Uriah's moving up from bantamweight, but this guy's the former featherweight champion of the WEC. So he's got some experience in that weight class for sure, and it's going to be really interesting to see the fight. I just can't wait, man. I've been watching both these guys for years, and they're 2 pioneers of the lighter weight classes. So this is truly a super fight in every sense of the word.
I absolutely cannot wait to watch this fight, but that brings us close to the end of this podcast, and it's time for you to give us your summary of all of the units that we put down today.
So, yeah, obviously last week we went 4 for 4 on underdogs, but this week we're changing it up, man, and we're just going to do one big play. 8 units, Frankie Edgar, straight up. I truly believe Frankie Edgar is going to dominate Uriah Faber. Now, the other bet that I'm going to consider at the weigh-ins is Luke Barnett. I just got to make sure that Mark Munoz isn't looking absolutely shredded. And if he's looking a little fat, I'm going to put a bet on Luke Barnett. And then a prop I'm eyeing would be 1 unit on Frankie Edgar inside the distance. But that's all speculation. You got to follow me on Twitter to find out if I'm going to play those. But I'm absolutely putting 8 units on Frankie Edgar straight up.
So other than Munoz looking fucking shredded at the weigh-ins, would the line, if it shifted, would that change your mind at all? Right now, Barnett is at minus 165. If he got to like minus 170, would you not do it?
Yeah, it's a little steep, man. I'd have to see the weigh-ins, but minus 165 is already a little bit too high for my liking. I might play it just to fade Munoz. But if it gets like too much higher, I'm going to pass.
All right, so keep tuned in to you on Twitter at Best Fight Picks for up-to-date picks, and you're going to tell us after the weigh-ins what exactly we're going to do. But right now, get that money in on Frankie Edgar over Uriah Faber before the line gets any more steep. And that's pretty much does it for today. Next week, you and I will be breaking down one of the most looked forward to fight cards in recent memory. At one time, people were saying this could be the next UFC 100. It's not that anymore, but UFC 187, you and I are going to break that down next week, and I absolutely cannot wait.
Yeah, and I'm just going to tell the listeners right now, we're going to go really, really in-depth for UFC 187. I know this one was a little short, but we're going to go very in-depth. There's so many good fights. I mean, Rumble Johnson versus Daniel Cormier, Vitor Belfort versus Chris Weidman, Donald Cerrone's on the card. We're going to have some big plays on that one. John Moraga versus Joseph Benavidez. All I got to say is right now, there's 2 underdogs I'm eyeing on that card, and I can't wait to reveal them on your show.
Well, one of them I will reveal right now. I cannot believe that Rumble Johnson is the underdog.
I can't believe it either, but I'm going to save my breakdown for next week because I'm going to go very in-depth. I have a very passionate opinion about that fight, and I can't wait to share it with the crowd.
So we will unveil that next week. Until next time, thank you so much for joining me, Daniel. Do you have any shout-outs?
Brian, thanks so much for having me on, man. I got to give a shout-out to my friends, my family, every single person that listens to this show. I really appreciate it. Feel free to hit me up on Best Fight Picks on Twitter, MMA Thought, or DFL on Drums. I'm always down to chat MMA with everyone. And shout out to Nick Baldwin. I was just recently on his show talking about the brightest UFC prospects and contenders. So you can check that out on MMA Junior. And Brian, as always, thanks so much, bro.
I've just got 2 shout-outs to give. I'd like to thank Stand and Bang MMA for having me on their podcast this week. Looks like you and I are really going places. We've each been on other podcasts. And also, my last shout-out, the one I give every single week, thank you so much to Unique Kennels, the official bulldog of MMA, raising affordable and healthy bulldogs for the last 30 years. I told you at the beginning to go get your daily dose of cute in. If you haven't done that yet, what the hell are you doing with your life? Go get that in right now on Instagram, instagram.com/Unique Kennels. I'll see you next week, Daniel.
See you later, Brian.
Namaste.